Now, I feel like Wes Streeting just wants to be hated because he comes out with the most unbelievable crap, and it's almost like he's trolling. Now, he wrote a piece in The Sun that's bad enough already. David Lammy also wrote for them in the same week. And I just want to say that it's shameful for Labour to write for The Sun. I support engaging with people across the board. I have no issues if Labour writes for The Telegraph or any other right-wing outlets. I get they have to go on GB News. But The Sun, though, that's a red line. Anyway, he wrote a piece about NHS funding and once again confirming that Labour will rely on the private sector. But it's this comment that angered a lot of people, and rightly so. Middle-class lefties cry betrayal. The real betrayal is the two-tier system that sees people like them treated faster, while working families like mine are left waiting for longer. Now, I have to say, Streeting is just a massive tosser. It's not middle class to want the NHS to be funded properly without private involvement, but he's doing his best to try and alienate people. And I think it's lost on him that the majority of the public want to see the NHS fully publicly owned. But I guess that makes us all middle-class lefties. Now, he tries to make it out that his argument is that the immediate thing for the health secretary to do is to bring down waiting times, and that means you have to use everything at your disposal. And I get that, but he's mischaracterising the argument from the left. Now, on day one, none of us expected for a Corbyn government to bring everything back in-house in the NHS. Of course, there would have been a long transition. It doesn't happen overnight. However, there would have been efforts to remove private involvement whilst injecting more funding to improve the service. That's the sensible thing to do. However, Streeting is trying to create this false dichotomy. Either we rely on the private sector and improve the service, or be purist about it and renationalise the NHS fully, but that means the service won't improve. And that is such a weaselly, disingenuous argument, because that is not reality. Now, you might buy it if he expressed his desire to remove the private sector from the NHS, but he has never supported that, and he doesn't support the NHS going back to a fully public model. He wants more private involvement. The end of the last year, he said he wanted to hold the door wide open for the private sector, in which he said this: I want those entrepreneurs that are coming up with cutting-edge treatments and technologies to know that when they come up with a great idea that can deliver better outcomes for patients and better value for taxpayers' money, they're not going to struggle to get through the front door of the NHS. Now, does that sound like using the private sector as, an emergency to improve the service in the short term? Or does that sound like an ideological support for the private sector, which just seems like straight up privatisation? Now, the NHS simply needs more funding. Yet Streeting has said the NHS will only receive more funding if he can reform it. And again, that sounds like privatisation. But Streeting maintains that he doesn't support further privatisation of the NHS. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Labour will never privatise the NHS. We'll work with the private sector to cut NHS waiting lists while we build the staff, the equipment and the technology the NHS needs to treat patients on time. Now, I think he's lying, right? Looking at all his public statements, past and present, he doesn't simply want to use the private sector, he actively supports privatisation. And he's also pretending that it's ideological to end private involvement in the NHS. It's bullshit. The opposite is true. The more the NHS relies on the private sector, the less money is actually being spent on the service itself. I refer you to PFI, where it started with John Major, but Blair also decided to rely on the private sector heavily to fund the NHS, which we now have to pay back with interest. It's costing us at least $2 billion a year to pay these private companies back. So in the long run, it has literally costed us more. Hospitals are in debt and in some cases are spending more on servicing it than on healthcare itself. So the pragmatic thing to do is to kick out the profiteers. What Streeting is planning is ideological, not pragmatic. Now, he also said he was up for a fight against NHS Unions, which shows he cares more about private companies over the service and its staff. A Labour MP is publicly saying in The Sun that he's happy to fight NHS unions. What a disgrace. Those unions represent health workers. They know far more about the NHS than Streeting does. And they say end privatisation. They also ask for a pay rise, which the Labour Party won't guarantee. Now, why does Wes Streeting have such a hard-on for the private sector being involved in the NHS? And why does he like to pick fights with healthcare unions? Might it have something to do with this? In January 2022 and April 2023, Streeting accepted donations of £15,000 from hedge fund boss John Armitage for staffing costs in his office. Armitage's interests include his stake, reportedly worth in excess of $500 million in US private health insurance giant United Health, America's largest health insurer. Campaign group Every Doctor also raised questions over donations from Peter Hearn, a majority shareholder in a recruitment agency which works with private healthcare companies, and his affiliated company, MPM Connect Limited. One of these donations topped £80,000, the group said, whilst another ran close to £50,000. So whilst he's trying to gaslight people by calling us middle-class lefties for simply supporting a health service and for wanting to get rid of the profiteers who are ruining it, the simple truth is he has been bought by the private healthcare lobby. He is an absolute disgrace. He will be a danger to our health service, and he will play a huge role in the downfall of the NHS. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and drop a comment. It's good for the algorithm, and I'm interested in what you have to say. If you're not already subscribed, please do, and hit the notification bell. You can also support this channel by becoming a member for 99p per month, and if you're feeling a little more generous, then you can support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month. This channel for a while has been uploading every single day, and it's quite a lot of work that is still voluntary and scheduled around my paid work. But I have so much ambition, expect in the future to see more variety in content, such as interviews and Vox Pops. But I want this to be a fully fledged media organisation where not only is this my full-time job, but to have multiple people working for Turn Left. I like to see a live show in the future, more content that delves into culture, history, and much more. But that can only be done if there's money. So please, if you can, support us in any way that's in your capacity. And thank you to existing members, subscribers, and patrons. See you next time.